All right, so moving on now, then into the next of our Egyptian tales. This is the tale of the Eloquent Peasant. I'm using Miriam Lichtheim's Anthology of Ancient Egyptian Literature. Volume 1 covers the Old and Middle Kingdoms. And this is dating from the same time as our previous two stories, the tale of Sinui and the story of the shipwrecked sailor. All three come from the beginning of the Middle Dynasty, or the Middle Kingdom, right around 1900 BC, 12th dynasty, right in there somewhere, all three of them. And they all share some common themes, actually. Last time we had seen that the common theme with Sinui was that of justice, Maat, M-A-A-T. Maat is the goddess of justice. And it isn't just, though, this is something I want to highlight here, it isn't just justice in the sense of the way we mean the word justice as redress for a crime. They mean it in a much larger cosmic sense, almost in the sense in which Heraclitus originally meant the word logos, as a cosmic structuring principle that puts everything in its right place. And the point of this story is we'll see that if justice is not done, then the whole cosmic order goes out of balance. To quote from Hamlet, time is out of joint. That's what happens if this man, to whom an injustice has been done, is not rendered justice properly. So as Oswald Spengler says, each of the great high civilizations has its own destiny idea. And the destiny idea of Egypt is Maat, the justice idea. Justice, logos, the destiny idea. It's the ordering principle that guides and shapes the entire civilization. Now this text, as we've seen, the tale of Sinui lay behind some of the biblical texts, such as that of David and Goliath and the story of Moses, and the story of the shipwrecked sailor also was connected. And in this case, we will see that this tale of the eloquent peasant is most likely, in my opinion, the prototype of the book of Job. The book of Job there is about justice as well, an injustice that has been done to Job. And it's also about the Magian destiny idea. The Magian civilization is defined by Spengler as the Judeo-Christian Islamic civilization. And there the idea of justice is best expressed in the Arabian concept of Kismet, where justice comes directly from God. Maat does not come directly from the goddess Maat. It's simply implicit in all things. She's simply its personification. But justice comes directly from God in the Judeo-Christian Islamic world, Kismet. And the book of Job for Spengler was the exemplar of this idea of Kismet. No justice is really done to Job because God does not admit any wrongdoing in that text. He simply scares him into submission, and of course Islam means submission, into submission. Mine eyes have seen thee, mine ears have heard thee. And then he gets rewarded for it. So the structure of the book of Job is very similar to this tale of the eloquent peasant, to which an injustice is done. This peasant, a man named Kunanap, so he's a peasant, and he tells his wife, I'm going to go into the city, load up my donkeys with all kinds of provisions. I need to go do business. And so they load up his donkeys, all kinds of stuff, spices, natron, salt. Let's see, there's a paragraph here describing all this stuff. It's quite a bit that he's hauling on his donkeys, leopard skins and all these different kinds of plants and products from his fields. And so forth. So he's got quite a load here. So he's going through the countryside, walking along the Nile on a narrow path with the donkeys. Very easy to rob a guy like this. This is a peasant, not a fighter. So he's vulnerable, and he's not yet in the city. And indeed, as he's going along, he encounters a bad guy, a guy who has some land. He does own a house, and he has land with corn growing in his fields and wheat, maybe barley. His name is Totnacht. Miriam Lichtheim mistranslates it here as Nemtinacht, but Maspero had originally translated it with tot as the prefix, which is absolutely essential, so she's gotten it wrong. Tot, as the prefix to this man's name, immediately invokes the god of justice. Tot is the god who is associated. His name actually comes from an Egyptian word tek, meaning the balance, referring to the scales of the judgment of the dead. And so the judgment of the dead, which we saw last time, comes in with the Middle Kingdom as part of its police state mentality to prevent the kinds of anarchy that ended the Old Kingdom from ever happening again. And here we have Tot in this guy's name evoking the judgment of the dead, in which, as we have seen, the heart is placed on one pan and the feather of the goddess Mat is placed on the other pan. And you have to hope that the feather weighs heavier than your heart, so that you have not sinned against Mat, the order of things. You've done your duties. You've done everything that was expected of you. You were a successful person. You didn't harm anyone, and so forth. So that's why Tot, and the idea of the balance is essential here. It is the Egyptian destiny idea, the balance. And so as we'll see here, so this nasty guy comes up with a scheme to go and get a sheet of linen, go in and lay it on the path in front of the donkey, in between the water and his property, where he's got his wheat fields. And so Kunanap is walking along, and he sees this, and the robber guy is there, and he tells him, "You're not going to walk on my sheet, are you?" He says, "Oh, okay, no, well, I'll go around." But in order to do that, he has to go trespass on the guy's fields, and just as the guy predicted, one of his donkeys eats barley from the field, which I believe in Egypt to this day is still a punishable offense by cutting off the donkey's ears. But here, he simply appropriates everything he's got. He says, "I'm taking all of this. Your donkey ate from my field, therefore I'm taking both donkeys and all that's on it. Go away. Fuck off." And so Kunanap is like, "What the hell is this going on here?" And the guy actually beats him. He takes a tamarisk branch and whips him, beats him down, and then steals his property. So he's pretty pissed off and hurt and offended, but he happens to know who the high steward of this land is, a guy named Renzi, son of Maru. And so he goes to him, and he goes to appeal to Renzi, and Renzi does not reply to him. Silence. That's another leading theme in this chapter is silence. Osiris is known as the Lord of Silence. He's the god of the darkness in the underworld. And the silence is always ominous because it bespeaks death, not being as opposed to being. Heidegger says that that non-being introduces, or the nothing, introduces a perturbation into being. I think we could say the same thing for the Egyptian consciousness, that silence introduces a perturbation into their concept of being. But he makes a petition to this high steward, and he makes a series of 9 petitions here. Now this is exactly the same as the structure of the book of Job, where Job now has had a wager has taken place between Satan and Yahweh. Satan's been bouncing around, and God points out to him, "Oh, have you considered my faithful servant Job?" And Satan says, "Well, I bet you he wouldn't be your faithful servant if you struck him down, took everything away from him." And God says, "You're on." So they take everything away from him, all his crops and his cattle and his children. He loses everything. And the wager is that Satan believes that he will curse you. He does not. His wife does. His wife curses Yahweh, but he never does. So he goes through this whole structure of the story without ever cursing God. He bemoans his fate, and he has these 3 friends who then come to visit him. And the 3 friends are, so it's very structured as this is. Instead of petitions, we have this group of discussions. It's very ordered, where the youngest of the 3 speaks first, then the middle, then the oldest. Then Job gives his reply to that. Then we do it again in the same exact sequence: oldest, middle, youngest, Job's reply, and a 3rd time. So this is done 3 times in exactly this very formal sequence that reminds me very strongly of the 9 petitions here that the eloquent peasant makes to the high steward here. And so the first thing he thinks all he has to do is talk to the guy, and he'll give him justice. So at first his petitions are optimistic. They get increasingly pessimistic as he realizes that this guy isn't listening to a word I say. It's actually the opposite. He says, "When you go down to the sea of justice," and there's Mat, The Egyptian word for justice is Mat. When you go down to the Sea of Mat and sail on it with a fair wind, no squall shall strip away your sail, nor will your boat be idle. No accident will affect your mast. Your yards will not break. You will not founder when you touch land. No flood will carry you away. You will not taste the river's evils. You will not see a frightened face. Fish will come darting to you. Fatted fowl surround you. For you are father to the orphan, husband to the widow, brother to the rejected woman, apron to the motherless. Leader free of greed, great man free of baseness, destroyer of falsehood, creator of rightness, Mot again, who comes at the voice of the caller. When I speak, may you hear. Do justice, O praised one, who is praised by the praised. Remove my grief, I am burdened. Examine me, I am in need. So then he realizes that though this guy is a peasant, the magistrate realizes that though this guy is a peasant, he's incredibly eloquent. And indeed, this story, one of the other themes about it, in addition to Mot, is eloquence and writing. So the magistrate then goes to the pharaoh, Nebkare, and he tells him about this is really eloquent peasant, but it's an anomaly. Most of these guys are illiterate, of course. You got to hear this guy, he basically says to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, okay, well, then get him talking and don't reply. And keep him talking, and we'll send a scribe, and we'll write down everything he says, and you bring it back to me when you're done. So note that this is like the book of Job. Once again, an injustice has been done to the protagonist that he thinks is what it appears to be, but it's actually a game being played on both. Here the pharaoh and the high steward are in cahoots just to listen to this guy's eloquence and write it down because it's so good. He has all these admonitions, and it's basically a paean to Mot, how things should be. And so they're translating orality into writing. Note that too. And so the wager that's played between Yahweh and Satan is similar to the game here that is being played with Pharaoh and the steward. So he goes back and now he gives him, the eloquent peasant, a second petition. And this time he says, rudder of heaven, beam of earth, plumb line that carries the weight, rudder, drift not, beam, tilt not, plumb line, swing not awry. So all these images of cosmic pillars and supports, that which supports the cosmos, and always the balance, the scales. Is it not wrong, a balance that tilts, a plummet that strays, the straight becoming crooked? And so now he makes the argument that if you don't uphold justice, in my case, and he knows he's in the right. There's no two ways about it. So he knows he's 100% certain of being in the right. If this is not upheld, if this guy's just going to ignore him because he's a poor peasant who has no money, then that has implications. It ramifies all through the cosmos, and nothing then is right if this one particular case is not redressed. And he says, lo, justice flees from you, expelled from its seat. The magistrates do wrong, right dealing is bent sideways. The judges snatch what has been stolen. He who trims a matter's rightness makes it swing awry. The breath giver chokes him who is down. He who should refresh makes pant. The arbitrator is a robber. The remover of need orders its creation. The town is a floodwater. The punisher of evil himself commits crimes. So he knows he's not being dealt with fairly. And the guy is just sitting there. The scribe, of course, is nearby. Scribes were very sacred in Egypt, as opposed to Mesopotamia. Writing was a sacred profession, looked upon with awe and reverence, the way we might look at an astronaut. Let's say, oh, there's an aura. He's got the right stuff. That kind of aura about the scribe. So the scribe will be there writing everything down, and the scribe, of course, the patron of the scribes is also Tot. Tot is not just associated with the balance. He's associated with writing because originally, I'm pretty sure that Tot, whose name means tech, which is the balance, was originally the one who did the weighing, but was displaced by Anubis. Anubis brings the soul of the deceased in, guides him to the balance, and then they watch what happens with the weighing of the heart and the feather, and then Tot writes. He's the writer, so he writes records the results. Then he pronounces it out loud. So in his case, he translates writing into orality Here the opposite is being done. The orality of the peasant is being translated into writing for the Pharaoh's delight, because he wants to read it for himself. I don't know why they don't just bring him to Pharaoh, but then you don't have a story, I suppose. So then he compares him to, you're a powerful man. And he compares him to these gods. And when gods are evoked in Egyptian stories, it's significant. It matters which god is being evoked. It's not a random thing. And he says, you are like a messenger of the crocodile, which would be Sobek, the crocodile god. And you surpassed the lady of pestilence, which is Sekhmet. These are both very negative figures in Egyptian mythology. Sekhmet is the lion goddess who brings pestilence, plagues, just as Apollo does in the Greek world. So she brings plagues, and she's ferocious, and there is a myth about her trying to wipe out all of humanity. She's eating everyone. And then, of course, Sobek is the crocodile god, but of course, there's a crocodile waiting in the scales of the judgment of the dead for, if the heart doesn't pass, he's going to gobble it right up. So there's that reference to it too. And then the third petition, he comes in, so then he evokes three more gods, and says to the steward, High steward, my lord, you are Re, lord of sky, with your courtiers. Men's sustenance is from you as from the flood. You are Hapi, H-A-P-Y. You are Hapi, who makes green the fields, revives the wastelands. So you have all this power that's analogous to what these gods do. Re goes across the sky, and his journey every day upholds, the sun upholds everything. In Egypt, the sun is the primary divinity, no matter which way you slice it. And but Hapi now is one of the four sons of Horus, and they correspond, their job is to hold up the sky. They're at the four quarters, each one of them. Hapi is in the north. So they hold the sky up. So there again, he's comparing the magistrate upholding justice to upholding the heavens, even from the earth. And Hapi is also in the four canopic jars, where the Egyptians, the four canopic jars are the four sons of Horus. They have theriomorphic heads, three of them do. One is human-headed. Hapi's is a baboon, and he's associated with the lungs. So they put when they take out the organs, they would put the lungs in with him. So he's associated with breath, breathing, and the lungs. And also he guides the rudder of a ship. So he's also associated with water and boating and so forth. So he's one of the four sons of Horus. So it matters that the peasant invokes him. And then also Tot, specifically Tot. He says, does Tot show favor so that you may do wrong? Be the equal of these three, he says. Uphold the world. What's wrong with you? I can imagine them sitting there quite bemused at this guy's erudition and eloquence. What's he reading? How does he come to possession of all this? So then a fourth petition, he comes in and greets the magistrate just as he's coming out of the temple of the god Harsaphes, which is a very giant god with a ram's head that the Greeks equated with Hercules. And so once again, we have the idea of this god as upholding the world, upholding the cosmic order. This is a powerful god. So he's coming out of his temple, and then he goes on, goodness is destroyed, none adhere to it, to fling falsehoods back to the ground. If the ferry is grounded, wherewith does one cross? And so forth. And it reads a little like a series of admonitions, almost like Polonius's speech to his son in Hamlet. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. You get all these bits and pieces of good advice, good life advice. That's why they like this guy so much. And then the fifth petition, he says, rob not a poor man of his goods, a humble man whom you know. Breath to the poor are his belongings. He who takes them stops up his nose. And we just had a reference to Hapi, the god of the lungs, so that's not accidental. And then there's a sixth petition where he comes in, clothing removes nakedness. Let's see. He who lessens falsehood fosters truth. He who fosters the good reduces evil. As satiety's coming removes hunger, clothing removes nakedness. As the sky is serene after a storm, warming all who shiver. As fire cooks what is raw, as water quenches thirst. Now see for yourself. The arbitrator is a robber. So you say, you're a fucking thief. You're supposed to be in charge here. What's wrong with you? He who should soothe makes sore, but he who cheats diminishes justice. Mott. Rightly filled justice neither falls short nor brims over. And they're getting a real kick out of this guy. And so there's a seventh petition where he comes in and says, they actually beat him. I forgot to mention that. After the third petition, in between the third and the fourth petition, the magistrate not only doesn't reply to him because the Pharaoh tells him not to. You got to keep him talking so we can write all this down. But he also sends two guys out to whip him and beat him. So he's being just constantly mistreated here in this situation, just like Job. O high steward, my lord, you are the whole land's rudder. The land sails by your bidding. You are the peer of Tot, the judge who is not partial at the weighing of the scales because he impassively records the results. He doesn't touch the scales. They do what they're going to do. And now, so we come to the eighth petition. Do justice for the Lord of justice, the justice of whose justice is real. In other words, the quintessence of justice should be your role. Why aren't you performing it? Pen, papyrus, palette of Tot. Remember, he's the god of writing. Keep away from wrongdoing. When goodness is good, it is truly good. For justice is for eternity. It enters the graveyard with its doer. When he is buried and earth enfolds him, his name does not pass from the earth. He is remembered because of goodness. That is the rule of God's command. The hand balance, it tilts not. The stand balance, it leans not to one side. So again, justice, the balance. You might say that Libra is the presiding sign of this whole story. And then finally in the ninth petition, he comes to his final words where he says, the balance is, be not heavy, nor yet light. Do not tarry, nor yet hurry. Be not partial, nor listen to any desire. In other words, the golden mean of the Greeks. You should always strive for balance. Do not avert your face from one you know. Be not blind to one you have seen. Do not rebuff one who beseeches you. Abandon this slackness. Let your speech be heard. Act for him who would act for you. Do not listen to everyone. Summon a man to his rightful cause. And then finally he says, I guess here I've been pleading with you and you have not listened to it. I shall go and plead about you to Anubis. In other words, he'll take the case to the other side because he believes he's going to be put to death. It might be an implication of suicide. Some commentators have suggested, but it's more likely that he knows that he's going to be probably put to death here, totally unjustly. So he'll have to take the case to Anubis, one of the gods of the underworld, who presides at the judgment, of the weighing of the dead. And then so what finally happens in the conclusion then is that the magistrate takes this writing and has it read out for the peasant to hear. So they translate the writing back into orality. They read it to him, and then they send the written text on a papyrus scroll. They roll it up, and they send it to Pharaoh, who loves it. He reads this thing, and he's like, this is one of the coolest, wisest things I've ever read in my life. Fantastic. Give him back everything. As Yahweh rewards Job with all of his goods back, I think twofold even, for his patience in putting up with Yahweh's test. Same thing here. Pharaoh rewards. He's in the role of Yahweh now, who rewards the eloquent peasant with all of his estate back. Now the balance is the central idea of Egypt, because the whole civilization is based on two lands, a balance between Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, which originally began as two totally separate cultures that were fused together into a balance, let's say, by the pharaoh Narmer. And that fusion about 2900 BC is what got the whole civilization up and running. And there's always a balance with a man and his ka. Everyone has a double, the ka, the balance, the two lands. And even in the first dynasties, and this may go on through the second dynasty as well, when the pharaohs were buried, they had two burial locations, totally geographically separate. One at Abydos, they had a tomb at Abydos, and they had a tomb at Saqqara. And since the tombs have been robbed, nobody knows which tomb the actual mummy would have been put into. We don't know for sure. And then they stopped this practice by the time of the third dynasty, when they built the first pyramid complex, that of the pharaoh Zoser, which is a long rectangular complex. They have the central pyramid there, which is a stepped pyramid. And instead of a separate geographical location for the double, the ka, they put it in the south end of the complex with a small pyramid there. And that becomes the second pyramid, that whenever they build pyramids, there's always that second pyramid specifically for one's double, for one's ka. So they married them together so they didn't have to do it at two geographical locations. Everything in Egypt is about the balance. That's the whole idea of the civilization, and that is the idea that informs this eloquent, well-written, well-thought-out little work. Okay, so we'll leave it there for this discussion.